Hi everyone, you're listening to the NDIS Circle. My name's Dan McCutcheon, and today we're going to speak about a topic that came up last week with a woman that I support through the Business Circle Specialist Coordination. We provide support coordination to her, and she has very high disability support needs, but her NDIS funding is quite limited. So really trying to figure out together with her how we can squeeze the most juice out of her NDIS plan and get the most out of her funding. So titled this week's podcast, 6 Ways to Maximise Your NDIS Funding. So let's get into it. So there's a lot spoken about getting the most funding possible in your NDIS plan, but the second and arguably sort of more important side of the coin, and that's actually maximising the funding that you do have. And from that, you're going to be able to gain the most benefit from it. So yes, you can and you should request an internal review of your plan if you feel it doesn't meet your disability support needs. However, this is ultimately a decision by the NDIA and the legal system if needed. So focusing on what we can control, what's within our locus of control, it gives us more time and energy to spend, excuse the pun, on the things that matter. So without further ado, let's get into some ways to get the most out of your NDIS funding. So number one, connect with quality providers, including obviously a support coordinator. So do your research, find high quality service providers in your local area to provide your core supports. That's your supports for morning and evening routines, personal care, accessing the community, and also your capacity building supports like support coordination, like your therapy. And ask around for recommendations. Lean on your support coordinator, lean on your LAC, your local area coordinator, to connect you with providers that are aligned with your values and have a proven track record and have experience of supporting people to achieve great outcomes. So cheaper isn't always better. A provider may offer a slightly better rate, but if they can't support you to achieve your goals, you're not getting good bang for your buck. So that's number one, connecting with good quality service providers. Number two is limiting provider travel. See, so much of people's funding get eaten up by travel. It's a real shame. Say if a therapist is traveling out to see someone, they've got an hour session, they're traveling half an hour each way, which is the maximum they can charge under the NDIS pricing arrangements. That's 2 hours that's going to be charged from the person's budget for a 1 hour session. Whereas if you travel to the clinic or you're able to do it via telehealth, or the therapist was able to apportion the cost, which means split the travel costs between yourself as a participant and another participant in the local area and share those travel costs, you might even be charged the hour for the session or the hour and just a little bit of travel. So you can really get so much more bang for your buck if you minimize those travel costs. And it might not be significant for one session, but when you add that up over the whole year or 2 or 3 year plan, it really, really stacks up and you get so much more benefit out of that if you can sort of minimize the travel costs in some way. Number 3, plan ahead and monitor your fund spend, so how your funds are being spent. So when you receive your NDIS plan, one of your first actions with your support coordinator or local area coordinator should be to identify your priorities. Your NDIS funding isn't your starting point, your goals actually are. You should work from your goals out. And at Circle SC, we use just a simple, smart goal setting template to get clear about what's most important to you. And this ensures your funds aren't whittled away on low priority tasks, and we really go for the things that are most important to you. So break those big goals down into smaller steps and daily or weekly habits that you can do on a regular basis, and then allocate funding towards these supports. If you have a 12-month plan, it's important to plan your funding across this time frame so you don't run out early and you don't fully use what you have received. If you don't use your funding, the NDI often sees this as meaning you didn't need the funding in the first place and may reduce the supports from your next NDIS plan. So at Circle SC, we catch up, we try and catch up at least every month with our people to see how they're spending their funding and if any changes or adjustments need to be made. If funds aren't being spent, is that because there's an issue with, say, the core support provider? Is there a change in providers needed? What's sort of the barrier there? You can log on to MyGov and look at your NDIS portal and ask your providers how the funds are going, how much is remaining, and sort of what that means for you in terms of hours of support going forward. Number 4 is choose value for money supports. So your NDIS funding is calculated based on certain types of support, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it flexibly to get the same outcome. So say you've got an overall therapy budget of $10,000, which is the NDIS stipulates for X amount of hours for OT, X amount of hours for speech pathology, and X amount for physiotherapy. It might be worth sort of exploring some different supports that give you better value. So perhaps instead of psychology at, I think it's $234 an hour roughly, you might explore counseling, which is $156 an hour. Instead of having a physiotherapist do your weekly sessions at, I think that's around $220 an hour, something like that, you might explore the physio to co-design a program. We did this recently for a young man support in Perth. We had the physio and the exercise physiologist work together to co-design a program, and then because it's cheaper and the participant can get more value for money from their budget, suggested, why don't we bring on this exercise physiologist who's going to actually do the regular weekly sessions. So that's worked out really well. The exercise phys has formed a great relationship with the young guy, and it's going really well. And the physio is doing quarterly reviews, so there's still sort of that joint collaboration, a multi-dis approach, but you're still getting some more value for money out of that. Number 5, use informal community and mainstream support. So what's existing already in the community. So your NDIS plan is based on paid supports, and it doesn't really include support you get from the family, the community, or other government services. So it's important to sort of utilize those more natural and community networks as well, while also being conscious of not wanting to burn through relationships with family and friends. If they are able to support you in sort of an informal way, that'll really free up some more funding for you to direct towards your more ambitious goals. Research what other government services offer: Department of Education, health, housing. There are grants, subsidies, accessible programs available, because all government services have a legislative responsibility to make reasonable adjustment, so to support people with disability to access and use their services. So even if you do have NDIS funding, they're still they can't shirk that responsibility. They still need to make reasonable adjustments to support people with disability to use their services. And then the last one, this last tip's not for everyone, but I thought it was important to sort of include. I think it's an underrated way of getting the most out of your NDIS funding, and that's the self-manage your funding. Obviously, by self-managing your funding, you hire and fire your own private support staff, and you have the option to use registered providers and also unregistered providers, so you have greater flexibility. You've got greater choice, and you can really decide what supports to purchase. It can be a very empowering way of approaching an NDIS plan and approaching the NDIS process. The downside is that with this extra empowerment comes greater responsibility and more paperwork. So see our blog on the Circle SC website, How Should I Manage My NDIS Funding? That sort of has a table with the pros and cons of each NDIS fund management style. With self-management, you can cut out that middleman and that administrative cost, meaning that you have more negotiating power with providers, and often you can purchase supports for a cheaper rate, meaning you can get more hours of support out of your NDIS plan. And alternatively, instead of paying providers cheaper, you can actually go above the NDIS pricing arrangements if you found an amazing provider that really goes the extra mile and you want to take extra steps to ensure that they stay loyal to you and stay in your team. You can actually pay them above the NDIS pricing arrangements as well. So totally up to you. Just gives you that more flexibility. If you are concerned about the additional paperwork and administrative burden of self-management, it might be worth exploring some of the tools out there. There's the Real Support Choices app, which is created to make the obligations of self-management easy. I think West Australian Individualised Services, WASTE, have some resources. There's some resources on the NDIS website as well. So yeah, that's my 6 tips to maximise your NDIS funding. I think it's an underrated topic, and I hope you've got some value out of that, and it's going to help you to squeeze the most juice out of your NDIS plan. You've been listening to the NDIS Circle. I'm Dan McCutcheon, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.